A very good evening to all pious mindfulness meditators. So we shall continue to explain the three common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena and overcoming three kinds of papancha or obsessions. So the characteristics of impermanence is defined as arising and passing away, or appearing and disappearing. Then the commentaries explains much clearer. For example, one commentary explained that a phenomenon never appear in the past, but due to a suitable condition, then it appears. After appearing, it will cease. So in other words, anicca means things of phenomena come where they never appeared before and disappear to where they never went before. So this phenomenon is secluded from the past and the future. So this is impermanent. It is arising due to condition. When the condition has passed away, it ceases, does not exist anymore. Then the second characteristic, dukkha. Dukkha, it is said in a commentary that dukkha is concealed by one's postures. When one feels pain in one postures, for example during sitting, so those who do not have experience in mental training might move or change postures consciously or unconsciously. So this, by changing to a new postures, the pain will disappear immediately. But very soon, pain is arising again in the new postures. Then one may move or change the sitting posture again. So in that way, one could not realize that this dukkha is hidden in the postures. That's why we give instruction to meditators, be patient with physical discomfort or pain during sitting meditation. So we need to develop patience. So when we develop patience, training oneself to tolerate with the pain or any kinds of physical discomfort, then we may realize the intensity pains is getting stronger, more distinct, and so on. But even though you might experience strong pain, but you have not yet realized dukkha. Even you experience strong pain. So you have to realize the characteristics of suffering is not about about experiencing physical pain or physical discomfort. The characteristics of suffering is defined, for example, in the comprehensive manual Abhidhamma, as the mood of continuously oppressed by rise and fall, or in other words, the nature of being constantly oppressed by the instant arising and passing away of that painful sensation or other phenomena. So when you experience pain during sitting meditation on any kinds of physical discomfort, that pain is known as the dukkha or intrinsic suffering. But to realize that the realized dukkha as being constantly oppressed by the instant arising and passing away of the phenomena or the painful sensation, then one needs to develop insight knowledge by the practice of mindfulness meditation. So it is also defined in the scriptures. What is impermanent is dukkha. What is impermanent is dukkha. So when you could realize impermanent, in other words, moment to moment impermanence, then you are able to realize dukkha, as being constantly oppressed by the instant arising and passing away of mental and physical phenomena. So this dukkha is known as sankhara dukkha in Pali, suffering due to formations. We can't realize sankhara dukkha by thinking or reading or hearing from others. We can only realize sankhara dukkha by the practice of Vipassana meditation. So when meditators are able to develop constant and continuous mindfulness and realizing the true nature of anicca, in other words, movement to movement impermanence, then they may able to realize sankhara dukkha. That means there's a continuous oppression due to instant arising and passing away of the pain or any mental and physical phenomena. So there's dukkha. So mindfulness meditators or Vipassana meditators have to realize sankhara dukkha during the practice. So when one could realize anicca, impermanence, then one would be able to realize dukkha and anatta. So it is difficult to realize anatta. The commentary explained that anatta, we cannot see anatta because it is concealed by compactness. In other words, when one could not realize the various elements clearly, so one identify that material elements as a permanent self or I. So we have to realize the primary material elements clearly. Each physical phenomenon or rupa consists of four primary material elements. But we can only see one of the four at each movement. For example, the movements of abdomen also consist of the other three primary material elements. But we can realize movements is due to manifestation of wind element. But at that moment, we only see movements clearly. So the commentary say the four primary elements, or the four primary material elements have to be separate, and not to exist separate from each other. But we can only realize one of them. We realize one of them because one of them becomes more distinct or more dominant. So the commentary said, access is in capability, not in quantity. That means one element becomes more powerful than the other three elements. That's why we can experience that material elements clearly. So sometimes you experience other material elements, for example hot. So it's because fire element becomes more dominant than the other three material elements. So only when we are able to realize the elements as well as the noting mind clearly, then we are able to understand no self or not self. So if we have not yet realized the three common characteristics clearly, then these obsessions, the three kinds of obsessions, craving or attachment, tanha, conceit, mana, and the notion this my self, DT, will be arising. So during the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, we have to overcome three kinds of obsessions in order to make progress. And we do not overcome one obsessions or one kind of papancha at each time. The three kinds of obsessions are overcome or removed or at the same moment. So it does not mean that one has to overcome, for example, the obsessions of myself, DT. When they can overcome it, then they practice further in order to overcome the craving, the other obsessions. Then they only overcome the other obsessions, conceit or mana. So these three kinds of obsessions removed or overcome at the same moment. When meditators are able to realize the three common characteristics thoroughly, so when meditators could realize three common characteristics clearly, usually we might experience one of the characteristics very clearly. For example, in this meditation, we may experience anicca constantly. In other words, we are realizing the instant arising and passing away of every phenomenon constantly, continuously. So when we able to realize the characteristic of anicca thoroughly, then definitely we will also realize the other two characteristics. In other words, when we realize one characteristic, we also come to realize the other two characteristics. Sometimes some meditators may misunderstood the practice. They might think that I shall concentrate my mind to realize impermanence. When I could realize impermanence very well, then I concentrate my mind to realize the characteristics of dukkha. Then they only practice in order to realize anatta. That means they realize these three common characteristics separately, not together. But the scriptures and commentaries say that when meditators are able to realize one of the characteristics thoroughly, or when they are able to see one of them, then they also come to see the other two characteristics. During the practice of mindfulness meditation, when the mindfulness is getting better and better with deep concentrations, meditators may come to realize that every process is a natural process. You do not have to make an effort to arouse, for example, the arising of the consciousness of mindfulness. The commentary, for example, Visuddhimagga explained that when one see correctly, for example, the arising of consciousness of mindfulness is due to a condition. There is no one or meditators make it to arise. So in other words, there is no such occurrence that consciousness must be made to occur by me. For example, consciousness of hearing. Do you think you have to make an effort so that the consciousness of hearing will arise? You do not have to make an effort. When the conditions are met, usually when a few conditions are met, then there's a cause. For example, when there's a sound or the noise, this is only one of the conditions. Usually we explain this condition. When there's a sound, there's a noise, then the consciousness of hearing will arise. But there are other conditions also. It's also mentioned in the scriptures and commentaries. So when there's a sound, the other condition is a space, so that the sound will be able to travel to your ear door. If there's no space, then it's not possible for the sound to travel to the ear door. Um, um, then the other condition is one is endowed with ear sensitivity. In other words, one is not deaf. If one is deaf, one cannot hear any sound or noise. So when these three conditions are met, then consciousness will be arising by itself. You do not have to make an effort to cause this consciousness of hearing to arise. So when one sees clearly, then one would remove this view of self, because one comes to understand or realize actually there is no self, or the community say there is no maker, a person to make this to happen, to make the consciousness of hearing to arise. So similarly, if one practices correctly, one comes to realize all the formations are arising and passing away by themselves. You do not have to make an effort to cause it to arise. You do not have to make an effort to put effort to make it disappear. So, but if one could not see correctly, and due to ignorance, then one might think that formation must be made to occur by me. So, what's the meaning of formation here? Sankhara. During the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, Sankhara or formation refer to nama rupa, mental and physical phenomena. Or some, but if you understand the teaching of dependent origination, the second link is also known as Sankhara. Ignorance, with ignorance as a condition, Sankhara comes to be, or formation come to be. But the formation in the dependent origination is not Namarupa, but is referred to three kinds of formation: mental formation, verbal formation, and physical formation. In the words, is a karma done in the past that one had performed in the past life. So here Sankhara, the meaning of Sankhara is different from the practice of Vipassana meditation. When we say formations, you may know there's one of the Dhammapada verses, Sabbe Sankhara Anicchati, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkhati. Here Sankhara means Namarupa, or nothing related to karma. So do you think that you have to make an effort for this formation to occur? So when you are practicing correctly, then you come to realize that when there's a movement of rising, then awareness or mindfulness will be arising. But when the practice is not yet matured, you may not be able to perceive the arising of mindfulness or the awareness clearly. But when you're able to practice better and better with sharper mindfulness and deeper concentration, you come to realize the arising of mindfulness is a natural process. when when there's a movements of rising, um, uh, rising naturally, then definitely the mindfulness will be arising, dependent on that process of rising movements. Um, so this is known as a formation. At the time, there are these nama, um, which is the mental process of mindfulness, and the physical process, which is the rising movements. Then you practice method. When you're able to practice better and better, then we say that you come to realize that at each movement there's a pair process. One is a rising movements, the other is a process of awareness or mindfulness. But is there a self or yogi watching this pair of processes? So sometimes some meditators might say that I am able to observe my mindfulness, that following the process of rising movements, I am able to observe my awareness or noting mind, following the pain, noting the pain, and so on. But is there an I or yogi observing these two processes? So how do you come to realize that there's a process of mindfulness or awareness arising at that moment? So you might say that I know, I observe it. But when you practice better and better, actually mindfulness or awareness also become an object for the next process of awareness or mindfulness. It is explained very clearly in the Visuddhimagga. For example, with the hearing consciousness, when there's a sound, we say the sound is a cause, the arising of consciousness is the effect. So this hearing consciousness can become a cause for the arising of mindfulness. So in other words, effect can become a cause. So there's because of hearing consciousness, you will develop sharp mindfulness. The mindfulness will notice or become aware of the arising of conscious of hearing. So this hearing consciousness becomes a cause for the arising of the process of mindfulness awareness. So hearing consciousness become a cause, the arising of the mindfulness awareness become effect. Then if your mindfulness is very strong, then it's possible that there's another awareness arising, come to perceive the previous process of mindfulness. So actually there's no one or a self or yogi watching the mind. So only when you could experience it well, then you come to make more progress. So that's why the commentary explains very clearly. It's not possible to remove the false view. If one thinks that I see with insight, or see the arising and passing away with my insight. There's only, but there's removal or overcoming these false views of self. When come to realize that only formation, see formation with insight, or comprehend, discern them, delimit them. Or delimit means meditators see two separate processes. Their arising and passing away are dependent on each other. So in other words, when there's a arising of hearing consciousness, you mindful of hearing consciousness. That hearing consciousness would pass away instantly. So you gain the insight knowledge of impermanence. But that there's no one or self realizing this passing away of the object, the consciousness. That mindfulness becomes a cause for the arising of the next process of awareness. That awareness come to realize that the previous process of mindfulness is not permanent. It also pass away or disappear instantly. So if your mindfulness is getting stronger, you come to realize there's only consciousness of knowing arising. So meditators need to develop sharper mindfulness. In order to develop sharper mindfulness, meditators need to put forth effort, increasing the effort gradually, so that the mindfulness becomes more and more attentive and precise. So, in other words, when meditators realize that at each movement there's a pair process, that pair process is perceived or realized by another process awareness. Then meditators come to realize no self. In other words, meditators cannot exercise any control over the arising of the object. They cannot exercise any control over the arising of the process of mindfulness. They cannot exercise any control over the passing away of the object. They cannot exercise any control over passing away of the mindfulness. Then in the following movement there's another process of mindfulness, come to realize the previous movement's mindfulness. So that's when meditators are able to attain deep concentration. So at that time meditators overcome this papancha, this myself. They only realize, there's only realizations or experiencing of formation arising and passing away. So when there's a realization or experiencing formation, then they'll be realizing that these formations are not permanent. They are not permanent in the sense of non-existent after having come to be. So at that time, this realizations of impermanent, overcome conceit or mana. These defilements, this defilement, conceit or mana, is arising due to clinging with what I call permanent, thinking this nama and rupa are permanent. So that's why there's a arising of conceit. So that's why the scriptures and commentaries explain that conceit is overcome or removed when one see or realizes all formation are impermanent. So when one realizes impermanent, one also come to realize dukkha. They are dukkha in the sense of oppressions by rising and falling, or appearing and disappearing. Or in other words, when meditators could realize impermanent clearly, that realization of impermanent overcome this papancha, conceit, or mana papancha, the obsessions of conceit. So they come to realize every formation is impermanent. So when they come to realize it's impermanent, they also come to realize that is dukkha, or in the sense of oppression by rising and falling. So one could not exercise over, or one does not have any power or to exercise control over these natural processes. So when one could realize correctly, then one would also overcome the other papancha, or the tanha papancha, obsessions of craving. We have craving or attachment because we wrongly identify the formation as presence or presence. But when one realizes that this formation is impermanent, is arising and passing away instantly, then one would experience oppression. So it means they are dukkha in the sense of oppressions by rising and falling. So it's not easy to realize anicca, dukkha, anatta well, unless you are able to develop constant mindfulness, and each movement of mindfulness is attentive, precise, and energetic. So when you have this experience of insight knowledge, it means insight knowledge into the true nature of mental physical phenomena, realizing anicca, dukkha, anatta. When you have this experience of insight at that moment, then this insight knowledge overcoming or removing three kinds of papancha, as well as other defilements. So this way of removing the mental defilements during the practice is known as tatanga pahana. In other words, defilements are abandoned or removed by insight knowledge. So only when one could attain the tatanga pahana, then this realization of tatanga pahana, you pave the way to the realizations of samucceda pahana. Samucceda pahana means when there's a realizations of path knowledge or Magayana. That Magayana has the power to uproot the latent defilements, anusa kilesa. There are three stages of defilements. The first stage is known as anusa kilesa. Those defilements lying dormant in the continuum of the five aggregates. So there are two kinds of anusaya. The first is aramana anusaya. Those mental defilements that lying dormant in the sense objects. When there's an impingement of sense object with the sense door, the sense objects might arouse certain defilements. For example, if the sense object is agreeable, it could arouse desire, longing for it, craving for it. If the sense object is not agreeable, then it could arouse the defilements of aversion, hatred, and so on. So this is known as aramana anusaya. Then the other anusaya, latent defilements, is known as santana anusaya. Those defilements has been lying dormant in the continuum of five aggregates since the beginningless of this samsara. So we have to develop, we have to attain path knowledge in order to uproot santana anusaya. And we could overcome aramana anusaya by insight knowledge. So this is the first stage of insight knowledge. So assuming that due to impingements of certain sense object, defilements could be manifested in the mind. So the defilements manifested in the mind is known as pariyutana kilesa. So when this pariyutana kilesa arising, if one could not overcome it, when the pariyutana kilesa, for example anger, when the anger is getting stronger and stronger, and one is not able to control the anger, then there will be outbursts of anger. That means that pariyutana kilesa causes one to violate moral precepts. The speech could become very abusive, or actions become very violent, and eventually one might violate the first precepts and so on. So during the practice mindfulness meditation, when there's deep concentration, then there's experiencing of insight knowledge. That insight knowledge overcoming these three kinds of papancha and other mental defilements. if one could sustain the effort, then one could make more and more progress. Eventually, one would realize the path knowledge. So that path knowledge has the power of uprooting this Santana Anusakilesa. So it's explained the commentary that insight knowledge will be able to overcome Aramana Anusakilesa. So that's why mindfulness meditation is something very practical. You are not only practicing mindfulness during the retreats, or you practice mindfulness 1 or 2 hours a day at home during walking and sitting meditation. You need to bring mindfulness into your daily life so that you could be mindful your sixth sense, or protecting your mind from the attack of the mental defilements. So how does one overcome Aramana Anusakilesa? Take for example, a good example is a memory. Sometimes there are various kinds of memories arising in your meditations. Some memories are very pleasant. Some memories could be quite painful. So assuming there's a painful memory arising, then your mindfulness is not yet sharp at that moment of arising, then that painful memory can give rise to some emotional mental states. For example, sadness. Or some painful memory give rise to anger, aversion. So meditators have to note the most current mental state. For example, you realize there's a memory. In the next moment, there's anger arising. Then you have to mindful note anger. You have to pay full attention to that mental state of anger. You mindful anger, at the same time the mind is still indulging in that memory. Then it's not possible for the anger to disappear, because the cause of arising of the anger is a painful memory. So you do not pay full attention to that mental state of anger, although you might note anger, but the mind still thinking of that painful memory, then most likely that anger will not disappear. But when you're able to pay full attention to that anger and note anger, then maybe anger will be subsided gradually. But as you know, the same painful memory may come back again. Even though you know it's a suffering, whenever this painful memory arising, but yet you mindful and know it had disappeared, then the painful memory may arise again, come back again. So what's the reason that this painful memory can arise again? Actually, it's also due to defilement attachments. It means we could not let go of that memories, although it's painful. So meditators need to mindful and note again. Whenever this painful memory arising, they have to note thinking. But sometimes the mindfulness is not powerful enough. Anger is arising, then note anger. So when they keep on practicing, it does be mindful and note it again. Whenever this painful memory and the anger are arising, they could mindful and note it again. Eventually, the mindfulness getting stronger over this memory. They could note thinking, then thinking disappear. Then there's no feeling of anger. Then when this memory does arise again, they could note it instantly. That memory disappear instantly. There's no feeling of anger. So why there's no feeling of anger when this memory is arising? Why there's no more anger? Eventually, when this memory arising, it's because when you're mindful and know it again, you do not have to contemplate that this memory is painful, suffering. You do not have to tell yourself to let go. But when you can mindful and know it again, mindful and know this memory and the anger as they really occur, you come to realize these two mental processes through your personal experience or direct experience. When you're able to mindful and note them until they have disappeared by itself, then eventually your mind comes to realize that these mental states are not permanent. And when your mind realizing that these mental states are not permanent, then do you think it's possible to cling to this mental state of memory and anger? We have clinging because we do not realize that the formation or the phenomena or anything are not permanent. There's clinging because we think these phenomena are permanent. But when you go mindful and note them again, you do not have to contemplate that this phenomena is anicca, or this memory is dukkha, or this memory is no self. What you should be done is to mindful of them as they really occur, or to note them as they really are. Then, as you mindful, in fact, your mind is experiencing the true process of that memory or the true process of that anger. So when you go mindful and note them again, eventually there's realization that these two mental states are not permanent. So it's not possible to cling or develop any form of clinging, grasping to something that's impermanent. So that's why it's explained in the commentary that this insight knowledge, realizing impermanent, overcome this aramana anusaya kilesa. But it's not yet uproots this defilement anger totally. Anger may be arising due to other sense object, but you do make an effort to apply mindfulness and note it again. Eventually that object will not arouse any mental defilements in your mind. So one who could practice mindfulness quite well, especially in their daily life, they could maintain purity of mind to a large extent. So when they could overcome this aramana anusaya kilesa, eventually there's a possibility to uproot santana anusaya kilesa. If meditators are not able to overcome aramana anusaya kilesa, then it's almost impossible to uproot santana anusaya kilesa. So Tatangapahana is explained in two ways. That means when you have insight knowledge, then there's no defilement arising at that time. There's no obsessions or papancha. There's no attachment or craving for any pleasant experience. There's no feeling of conceit. I could observe well with my strong insight. There's no self except formation, mindful of formation with insight. Then at that time, this realization, insight, knowledge, overcoming these three kinds of obsessions as well as other defilements. So this is known as Tatanga Pahana. Defilements overcome by insight knowledge. So when meditators could sustain effort, then this realization of Tatanga Pahana, you pave the way to Samucceda Pahana. But when the mindfulness is getting weaker, and concentration is getting weaker, then the realization of insight knowledge also getting weaker. That means, in other words, there's no clear realizations or experiencing of impermanent, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Then defilements can arise again, or hindrances can arise again. So sometimes meditators may have some good experience insight. Sometimes they have very poor experience insight because the practice is not stable. Then Tatanga Pahana also refers to the overcoming of Aramana Anusakirisa. So that's why mindfulness is very practical. You should apply mindfulness in your daily life, especially when there are various sense objects coming in contact with the sense door. Sense door means the eyes, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, as well as the mental object cognized by your consciousness. So in that way, you might overcome this Aramana Anusakirisa. So this way of overcoming Anusakirisa, Aramana Anusakirisa, is also known as Tatanga Pahana. But some teachers translated this way of Tatanga Pahana as a partial removal. In other words, you remove defilements that is caused by the sense object, only towards that sense object, but not by other sense objects. So the aim of the mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, is to purify the mind from all kinds of defilements. So this practice mindfulness can be done at any time, any place. That's why the Buddha said mindfulness is helpful at everywhere. Mindfulness needed all the time. So it's important to carry forward your practice, to practice constantly, continuously. Then you could purify your mind from all kinds of defilement eventually. So I wish all meditators be heedful. Be heedful means be mindful, so that you could purify your mind from all kinds of mental defilements and eventually attain enlightenment, be free from the cycle of birth and death, samsara.